I'm Will Dove, and this is the IWR News for the week ending August 16th. In our top stories this week, we launch a petition to support a new conservative bill to ban CBDCs in Canada. Taxes are soon to comprise over half the cost of filling your tank. An interview with WHO watchdog James Roguski on their recent declaration of a new global health emergency, and solid data on the globalist depopulation agenda. Those and 9 more stories that mainstream media won't report, and our government doesn't want you to hear. Conservative MP Ted Falk introduced a bill in June that would make central bank digital currencies illegal in Canada. CBDCs, if implemented, will be used in conjunction with social credit scores to control where we can go, what we can buy, and even our right to basics like medical care. Bill C-400, officially titled the Framework on the Access to and Use of Cash Act, successfully completed its first reading in the House on June 13th. Falk says this legislation aims to establish a national framework to safeguard the accessibility and usage of cash throughout Canada. The bill proposes significant amendments to existing financial laws. It seeks to modify the Currency Act, limiting the finance minister's authority to unilaterally recall banknotes. Additionally, it would amend the Bank of Canada Act to prohibit the central bank from creating a digital currency. Falk emphasized the importance of physical cash for vulnerable populations, charities, community organizations, and remote communities. He stated, "For millions of Canadians, particularly the most vulnerable folks in our population, physical cash is essential to everyday life." Falk also highlighted cash's role in preserving privacy, describing it as the only truly anonymous form of payment, in an era of increasing infringement on privacy rights by governments, banks, and corporations. The bill aligns with public sentiment revealed in previous Bank of Canada consultations. These surveys demonstrated overwhelming opposition to the implementation of a digital currency in Canada. 86% of Canadian respondents expressed negative views towards the concept of a digital Canadian dollar. In contrast, only 5% showed positive interest, with less than 1% believing Canada needs a digital currency. We have started a petition at change.org to support the passing of Bill C-400. You'll find the link to sign the petition below this report. Please sign and share the petition with your friends. Canadian drivers are facing an uphill battle at the pumps, with nearly half of the price of gasoline set to be paid in taxes by 2030, according to the Canadian Taxpayer Federation's 2024 Gas Tax Honesty Report. By 2030, some provinces' residents will pay more tax than they do for the gas itself. As of the third week of July, Canadians paid $38.11 in taxes and $68.22 for the pre-tax fuel to fill up a 64-liter tank, totaling $106.33. Currently, the average Canadian pays almost 36% in taxes to fuel their vehicle. The total tax consists of 4 components. Provincial tax is about 38%, federal tax is around 30%, carbon tax is just over 32%, and tax on tax is about 7.6% of the total tax paid. Tax on tax occurs when some governments calculate sales tax after adding all the per-liter taxes, resulting in taxes being paid on top of existing taxes. In 2024, Canadians paid an average of 4.5 cents per liter in tax-on-tax costs. Statistics Canada's June inflation data highlighted that the 2 provinces that had removed their carbon and fuel tax remained on one end of the inflation spectrum, with the rest of the country on the other end. Saskatchewan and Manitoba's inflation remained at 1.4% each, with the next lowest province being Quebec at 2.2%, and the highest inflation rate seen in Nova Scotia at 3.5%. Manitobans currently pay the least to fill up their 64-liter tank, as the only province with no provincial taxes. They pay $90.78, followed by the second lowest province, Alberta, at $98.04. The Liberals have raised the price of the carbon tax every year since 2019. The carbon tax reached $80 per ton on April 1st of this year. The tax is scheduled to reach $170 per ton by 2030. Cabinet is investigating ways to federalize firefighting, says Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan, adding that a Canadian version of the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency is being considered. Sajjan told reporters, "The impacts of climate change had us deploying the Canadian Armed Forces on such a frequent basis it was impacting them," he said. But what this is really about is revealed by my recent special report, Conservatives versus Liberals, Top 10 Fears for the Future. As I revealed in that report, the original 35-question survey from Policy Horizons Canada is a psyop. They're looking for the fear buttons to push. While my conservative viewers who took my reproduction of the survey were dismissive of the idea that our forest firefighting agencies would be overwhelmed, the Liberals who took the survey rated that as a high concern. We're being subjected to a constant false narrative that man-made global warming is causing an increase in forest fires. With a National Emergency Management Agency, they can easily mount an ineffective response to fires, many of which are intentionally set, and then tell Canadians that global warming is so bad our firefighting services can't keep up. Canadian building permits dropped again in June by 13.9%, continuing the trend of a softening property market despite the government's promises to accelerate housing development. According to Statistics Canada, the decline in June was even greater than the previous month, which saw permits drop 12.2% in May, and the data is even worse on a year-over-year basis, where the overall value of permits issued in June has dropped by 21.6%. Building permits help to provide an indication of construction activity, as Statistics Canada surveys 2,400 different municipalities, which account for 95% of the country's population. However, building permits do not guarantee that construction will be completed. The total value of residential permits decreased 11.5% to $6.5 billion in June. Provincially, Ontario and British Columbia saw the largest decline in multifamily dwelling permits, with Ontario reporting the largest monthly decrease since December of last year. According to StatsCan, the total value of non-residential sector permits decreased 18.1% to $3.5 billion in June 2024. The industrial component dropped 42.6% in June, following a 21.3% increase in May. Housing starts also fell 9% in June, according to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, with a 0.4% average drop across the last 6 months. This report is just one example of the investigative journalism I bring you at ironwillreport.com. My efforts to bring you the truth, with 2 exclusive interviews and 1 counter-narrative news report each week, as well as with special reports like my recent report, Conservatives versus Liberals, Top 10 Fears for the Future, are entirely funded by viewer subscriptions. I know it's difficult to get used to the idea of paying for news. Pretty much since radio and TV news started, we've been able to access it for free. But mainstream media can no longer be trusted. They are funded by our government and large corporations, and they work for them. Independent journalists, such as myself, work for our viewers. If you're not paying for your news, someone else is, and that someone else has an agenda. You can get a free 15-day trial at ironwillreport.com without a credit card. You will be granted instant access. See what you're missing at no cost and no obligation. Memberships are just $9.95 per month, or save 20% with a $99 annual membership. We also have 2 offline payment options for those of you concerned about government surveillance. In this week's members' version of the IWR News, my new regular segment, World War Watch, with important updates on both the Russia-Ukraine war and the Middle East. An interview with WHO watchdog James Roguski on the declaration this past week of a global health emergency. A new study proves that exposure to pesticides greatly increases cancer risk. The CDC admits they faked COVID death numbers. A Japanese study shows that the COVID vaxxed are at much higher risk of heart disease. Solid data on the globalist depopulation agenda. A win in Ontario for our privacy rights. And the UK's National Health Service takes backlash from woke patient policies. Over the summer, I'm slowing down a little and only releasing 1 interview per week. This is allowing me more time to work on other projects, such as this complete revamp of the IWR News. I will resume my regular schedule of 2 interviews per week in September. This week, on Sunday, an interview with Privacy Academy founders Glenn and Eric Medder. The Privacy Academy teaches regular folks how to protect themselves against government and corporate surveillance. And best of all, their courses are designed to be understood by anyone. No computer or technical knowledge is needed. Also, Eric and Glenn will be holding a free webinar for my viewers. You'll find a sign-up link for the webinar under the interview when it is posted this Sunday.